Thank you for joining this special emergency community meeting that is spanning well beyond the borders of the Queen Village community. My name is Eleanor Ingersoll. I am president of QVNA, but tonight I am honored to be representing more than 1,500 people that have registered to participate in this open forum, town hall. It's a singular issue on the table tonight: how to curb the escalating safety and noise problems of ATVs, dirt bikes, slingshots, and motorcycles. Why? Because they are racing along commercial corridors as well as residential streets, speeding in the wrong direction on city streets, racing down pedestrian sidewalks, stopping traffic to congregate and perform some dangerous stunts, revving modified engines at high decibels throughout the day, evening, and early morning through business corridors and residential neighborhoods. These noise and safety issues affect all corners of the city of Philadelphia, but standing together, we are joined tonight by representatives from, if you will indulge me, Bella Vista Neighbors Association, Brewerytown Sharswood Community Civic Association, Callow Hill Neighbors, Center City Residents, East Kensington Neighbors, Fairmount Civic, Fishtown Neighbors, Franklin Bridge North Neighbors, Gray Ferry Civic, Harrogate Civic Association, Hawthorne Civic Association, Logan Square Neighbors, Northern Liberty Neighbors, Old Richmond Civic, Packer Park Civic, Passyunk Square West, Port Richmond and Petroleum Civic Association, Society Hill Civic, Somerset Neighbors for Better Living, South Port Richmond Civic, Spring Garden Civic, Washington Square West, Queen Village, and from the business districts, we had the Philadelphia Chinatown Redevelopment District, South Street Head House District, North Broad Renaissance, Avenue of the Arts, Center City Business District, and STOP, the Safe Travel in Our Streets Coalition. So geographically, you can see that we have spanned participation from all over the city. We are here. Why? Because the lapse in city service has sent too many responsibilities to neighborhood organizations: street cleaning, supporting community centers, advocating for zoning transparency and rules, and fundraising for community projects. But the line has to be drawn at policing. Volunteers have limited resources and authority for truly keeping their neighborhoods safe. We need the city to step up with a sustainable and funded action plan. Quite honestly, this goal should have been identified and implemented from the city, but in lieu of that, community organizations are banding together in a resounding call to action. So how does a sustained and funded strategic plan form? I'm happy to introduce the representatives of the agencies that can make that happen. Deputy Police Commissioner Joel Dales, who leads the ATV detail through the city and was also a participant in our similar September 2020 community meeting when we thought 100 participants had truly tipped the scales. Rich Montanez, Deputy Commissioner of the Streets Department, is here to discuss potential solutions via deterrents like rerouting traffic and safety cushions. City Councilman Mark Squilla, an advocate for tightening legislation to better identify what is lawful and what is not. Councilman Allan Domb at large, who is actively exploring options for an all-terrain park. Councilman Derek Green at large, also a constituent advocate who has vested interest in increasing budget allocations to manage this problem. The First Assistant District Attorney, Robert Listenbee, can explain what warrants prosecution after an arrest. Also joining is Lamar Stewart, Chief of the Community Engagement with the DA. Unfortunately, half an hour before the start of this meeting, we received word that Managing Director of the City of Philadelphia, Tamar Alexander, who would be the person to explain what resources the administration is willing to put forth in this effort, was unable to attend. In his place, we are happy to have Mike Carroll, Deputy Managing Director of the Office of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability. So I'm going to begin tonight because I know we don't have much time, and this was a last-minute meeting put together after a very rough night across the city Wednesday night. So I appreciate you all for collecting your schedules together to make it here. I also want to let all of our participants know of now, which we are up to 991, that we received all of your questions. We looked through all of them. We're going to do our best to collate them, and we do welcome questions near the end being put in the chat that we can direct to the different panelists. But I'm going to start tonight with Deputy Commissioner Joel Dales, because a lot of the questions we received are geared around what are police doing. Now, we know police are doing quite a lot, but you are charged with balancing many other priorities in the city. But on this singular issue, residents really need to know a couple of things: how the details work and how often. And I'll go over this again. What warrants an arrest? Explain what the rightful action can be taken by a police officer. And then the other mitigating factors: is manpower an issue? Is funding an issue? And at what point would state enforce, and what point would you engage state enforcement to be helpful in considering state highways like Broad Street that run through the city?
Okay, first and foremost, thank you so much, Eleanor, for putting this meeting together. We are all here for the same reason. I'm frustrated just as much as the community is frustrated with the issue of ATVs and dirt bikes in our city. But I'm gonna let you know that we are trying our hardest to curtail the issue. Just want to share a few things with you, what we have been doing this year to try to curtail the issue. First and foremost, usually I would start the detail in May, but this year, based on the conversation I had last year, it was near the end of the year, I had a meeting with Eleanor and her staff, and we talked about starting the detail early, which I did. I started the detail in March 20th to be exact. It was a city, I've been running the detail citywide because it's a citywide issue, not just Center City, not just South Philadelphia, it's a citywide issue. And on top of that, we have high volumes of shootings, crimes such as homicides and non-fatal homicides that we have to attend to as well. But I'm not ignoring the ATV and dirt bike issue. So I'm going to share a few things with you. One, what we have done thus far and what we're going to continue to do, what we're doing, what our plans are in the future. And two, what other things that we are policing throughout the city as well. So as I mentioned, we have been running a detail since March 20th. The last time we ran the detail was this past weekend. This past weekend, we confiscated 31 vehicles total. It's a combination of ATVs, dirt bikes, as well as miscellaneous vehicles such as mini bikes, dune buggies, side-by-side vehicles, you name it, we're confiscating vehicles. Year to date this year, we confiscated over 200 vehicles, which include ATVs and dirt bikes and miscellaneous vehicles, which I mentioned as far as mini bikes are concerned. We also took the initiative to train more officers on dirt bikes. I started the training last month. We trained more officers to ride dirt bikes because we believe that's very effective to pretty much crack down on these illegal activities in our city. This month as well, also had another class we put through training as far as training police officers to ride dirt bikes. So we're doing that as well. We also got together, I met with the commanders, the Center City commanders and South Philly commanders as well, to talk about ways to respond to large gatherings of ATVs and dirt bikes. So we got together, to utilizing 3 districts within the Center City and South Philadelphia area to respond to large gatherings within that particular area of South Street and South Broad Street. When we're not running the ATV detail, we also have another detail that we are policing, which I don't believe everyone on this call is fully aware of. But those of you who are from East Division, North Philadelphia, Northwest Philadelphia, especially Aramingo Avenue, you know exactly what I'm about to talk about. We have a large gathering of cars coming from the tri-state area. With past couple weekends, over 1,000 vehicles gathered in our city to drag race, to blast their music. So we're policing that as well. So those police officers who were assigned to that detail, I'll pull some of those officers to also police South Street as well as South Philadelphia, the south portion of Broad Street, when the detail's not up and running. And their main responsibility is to divert those groups to leave the Center City area. Okay, so we're pretty much displacing, but we are cracking down on confiscating vehicles. Now, when the ATV detail is not running, we are still confiscating ATVs and dirt bikes. We also have to police the South Street corridor as well. South Street, and those of you who live on South Street, especially the head house, they know that we pull police officers from other parts of the city to staff South Street, because South Street is it gets very crowded over the weekend, and there are a lot of issues that are occurring on South Street. So we have to make sure we have a pretty much a strong police presence on South Street. And those officers on South Street, they're out there, they are enforcing the law. You may not be satisfied with some of that they're not enforcing what you want them to enforce, but those are the conversations we're having to have them increase those enforcements, such as noise, loud music, loud mufflers, things of that nature. So we are talking about increasing those type of enforcements on South Street. We also we work with the streets department, the transportation department, which Mike Carroll's on the line. We talked about other ways of conquering this problem, because enforcement is not the only solution to actually curtail this problem. And for those of you who don't know, the East Coast, we're not the only city dealing with this problem. We have, you name it, New York City, Broadway. You got ATVs and dirt bikes taking over Broadway. You have ATVs and dirt bikes taking over Newark, in Newark, New Jersey, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, Los Angeles, you name it, it's everywhere. Even these large car gatherings is happening across the nation. That's exactly what's going on. We also, again, we coordinate with the district attorney's office, because my thing is, I said, you know what, when we catch these individuals, they can be charged with eluding police. They can also be charged with recklessly endangering another person. So the district attorney's office, they actually met with us last month. We had a pretty decent meeting. We are meeting again this week to talk about plans on charging those individuals who are extremely reckless out there when they operate in these vehicles. So we're meeting this week.
One question, I don't mean to interrupt, but what is the balance between what the public perceives as a non-pursuit versus the addressing and charging or writing tickets for the reckless actions? Can you explain some of that?
So I'm sorry, repeat that one more time.
There is a public perception that there's a complete hands-off approach to the entire ATV situation. And it's that lack of understanding or communication that I think is ratcheting up the fatigue and anxiety across the city. Can you explain a little bit about what the take is, what is permissible and what is not? What are you authorized to arrest or write tickets for?
So we will, I'm not going to go into details because we have over 1,500 people on this call, and I don't know who's on the call. And I do not want to educate the illegal riders if they're on this call, but we are prohibited from pursuing vehicles, but we can pursue for certain reasons, such as serious crimes. If a person committed a forcible felony, meaning that they committed an act where they seriously either threatened or actually carried out the act of seriously injuring another person. So those are some of the reasons we can pursue a vehicle, even if they're in possession of a deadly weapon. We can pursue vehicles for that. So if they're carrying guns, yes, we can pursue vehicles for that reason. But we also have to be careful as to how long we will pursue an individual, because we got to make sure that we don't jeopardize the safety of the public who's not involved in this illegal activity. And believe it or not, we have to also make sure that we protect that rider as well, who are committing crimes.
Now,
So,
people are also concerned that they're not seeing what they may have perceived before as a cop on every corner. And I've heard this as well. Can you explain a little bit about how you're dealing with manpower, not only from COVID, but from the all of 2020, which is putting you where you are and how you need to allocate your resources?
So we are allocating our resources to the best that we can do, because again, priority is crimes, shootings, homicides. That's priority. Our hotspots in the city, that's where the police also need to be. That's priority. We're not, again, I'm stressing it loud and clear that we're not ignoring the ATV and dirt bike issue. We are policing that as well. So pretty much priority comes first. We are stretched thin. That's one of the challenges as far as our resources are concerned.
So people do need to understand that for various reasons, the force is not as big as it may have been a year or two ago. And so you're dealing with how to allocate resources to hotspots as they arrive, but still prioritizing the detail with the ATVs. Have there been, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but it was a question also that came through, have there been accidents, injuries, hopefully not fatalities, due to any of this illegal action? these illegal
Um,
vehicles?
there has been auto accidents. I don't have the exact number. I do have the number for fatalities. There was only one fatality that involved an ATV this year, I will say. And last year, I believe, was a combination of, it was 5 total, but it was a combination of dirt bikes and ATVs last year. But the higher numbers are motorcycles, believe it or not, legal motorcycles that were actually fatal.
I understand. I understand. And I know we have a lot of people to get to, and I also want to be able to circle back around to you. And I just want to make sure that we didn't leave off any important things. Lastly, is there at some point would state, because another question that was abundant from our registrants was noting that seeing these many ATVs and other vehicles coming over the bridge, the Franklin. Is there a point where you collaborate with other police departments, use state, use federal? What would be the steps to that in a thumbnail sketch?
So we are working with the state police. We actually working on a plan in reference to these car gatherings. So there will be it will be working with us moving forward in reference to these large car gatherings throughout the city.
Excellent, excellent. Deputy Commissioner Dales, we're definitely not finished with you, but thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'd like to go next to Rich Montanez, Deputy Commissioner of the Streets Department. With all due respect, you have been also very accessible in Zooms over the summer dealing with this, but can you give people an idea of the realistic possibility of traffic calming measures, street closures, and what street closures ultimately lead to is overflow to other side streets?
So the streets department's been working along with the police department on traffic calming the city of Philadelphia. We are concentrated in our high injury network, so where we're having the most fatalities, but we're also targeting some of the areas where we see drag racing. And it's like pushing water. We go in one place, we traffic calm that area, and they appear the other thing, as the deputy said before me. So we are working with them. It is a tireless task, and it's a daunting task because our resources are kind of stretched too. Our streets department not only does transportation, but we also pick up sanitation. So we're constantly working with that. We've experimented in the South Street with the South Street Hat House this year, thanks to COVID. One of the things we can thank COVID for was doing street closures to try to deter the bikers and the ATVs from using South Street. So we pedestrianize, is the word we like to use, a couple blocks in South Street on the weekend to kind of discourage. However, like I said earlier, it's like pushing water. The ATVs are actually, we seem to see them in other blocks, in other areas. So it's a slow process for the city. We cannot traffic calm the entire city all at once, but we're in the process of doing it. The good news is we are working on a pilot also with the state to try to traffic calm state roads to see how we can improve them. And we're hoping to finalize that pilot by the end of the summer.
Can I ask you, what is the reality of a longer term street closure along some of the hardest hit business corridors like North Broad Renaissance, Avenue of the Arts, South Street, and possibly whatever Walnut Street through Center City? Is this a realistic possibility, considering that it's impossible to drive through Center City now at all with all of the various street work, construction, et cetera, et cetera?
So my job is a delicate balance of trying to make sure that we provide enough room for businesses to do business in the city of Philadelphia, but also for safe commerce through the streets. The businesses need delivery trucks, they need UPS, they need FedEx, they even need us, some of us driving there or even getting to the restaurants. So we're trying to do a delicate balance, and as both council members in here would tell you, they call me constantly about I piss somebody off or I piss somebody else off, but we are trying to do our best balance. We do try to work with all the businesses and the businesses, the residents and everybody around that we hear from to see what's best for that community.
So is there an avenue, no pun intended, by which residents can help demonstrate their desire to have more semi-permanent street closures, be it certain days or certain hours of certain days? What would it do to make it easier or a possibility for you if there was resident input?
One, you can inform the streets department utilizing 311. And number two, so street directions, parking, what happens out in the public right of way is governed by city council. So you can inform your desires to the council members, and that then they can ask the streets department for a study. So keep in mind, the streets department makes recommendations of street directions. It is ultimately council who votes on it and selects those street directions.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Montanez. I'm sure we'll be coming back to you if time allows. And I want to get to our councilmen who are here with us tonight. Councilman Squilla, you have talked about the benefit in tightening up the language around the city laws governing these vehicles. Can you tell me about that?
Yes, we have worked with the law department, with the police, with Councilmember Domb and Green, and actually we'll be introducing something tomorrow that will help. There was a disparity between ATVs, motorbikes, dirt bikes, and they were all treated differently. So it made it very difficult for the police to whether to confiscate, was it an ATV, was it a dirt bike? There are legal bikes and there's certain rules that PennDOT has for street-worthy vehicles. And if they're a street-worthy vehicle, but they still don't have insurance and licensing and things like that, police could still do a live stop. But if it's a illegal bike, they could do it without checking any of that stuff. And we sort of had a gap in our legislation that didn't treat all these illegal vehicles the same. So what this legislation actually will do is to group all the illegal vehicles into one form and then give the police the authority to confiscate them. This, it's been a challenge as we go through the process here. We looked at alternatives, whether it's traffic calming measures, whether it's enforcement, whether it's an opportunity for an active location for people to ride their bikes. All these things need to be explored. We and Councilmember Domb will talk about a task force that was created to engage not only the riders, but then the people who have concerns with the riders. How do the police engage the riders? Are there any options for these riders, and where do they go? We know they're not legal on the streets. We know that riding the wrong way up a one-way street or riding on sidewalks where people are walking or eating is not something we could tolerate. So we need to be able to enforce those measures. But in the meantime, what else can we do to deter this activity? And that's where the challenge comes in. And that's why it's important to have everybody working in the same direction, having the administration and the mayor's office, and Mike Carroll's here to speak on that behalf, the district attorney's office, the police department, and council, all to agree on how we move forward and come up with a plan. There's not one thing that's going to fix this. It's going to have to be a multi-pronged approach that we need to address. And street calming measures is going to be one part of it. Enforcement is going to be another part of it. Possible open space for people to ride their bikes and trail their bikes to that location will be another part of it. And we're open to other ideas and other things. But like Commissioner Dale said, there's a lot of these other municipalities do reach out to us, and they reach out to the city of Philadelphia to see how we deal with these. And I know we don't do a perfect job. And right now, I mean, my email blows up every time we have these events. And again, it's not just, South Street or Pine or Queen Village or Society Hill or North Broad or South Broad. It's Aramingo Avenue. It's Castor Avenue. It's, it goes all the way up to the top of my district, all the way down to the stadiums. So it's everywhere. And so to address that just with a couple, cushions or calming measures is maybe affect one area. It's not going to fix this problem that we have. So the reason I think it's important to have a meeting like this is to make sure that we're all on the same page, make sure that the administration is willing to work with the police on the enforcement measures, work with the district attorney's office. As you heard, Commissioner Dales is working with the DA now to see what, charges can be filed if they could have somebody who's at a bike who's using it illegally or dangerously, how that would be perceived. And then how we as a city look at making it available for maybe some of these riders. Listen, these guys are talented. If you look at some of the things they do, it's amazing. You know, it is very dangerous on our streets. They shouldn't be on our streets, but maybe it is an option to have them go to a park somewhere and look at that and come up with other avenues so that we could do both a place for them to go, but also know that you can't do it on our streets.
And that's everybody's greatest hope. And that's why I'm going to ask Councilman Domb what the movement is on an all-terrain park in the city.
Thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you for inviting me. I'm just going to, before I get to that, I think that's an alternative down the road, but I think we have an immediate problem. And the immediate problem is the quality of life across the city. I hear from everybody, and as Councilman Squilla mentioned, that every part of the city is affected by this. And this is illegal. Let me just be clear. This is illegal to ride on these streets. It's illegal. We have an ATV division. Maybe we should untie their hands. I'm going to speak very openly. Maybe they should be trained that they can chase these vehicles and confiscate them and destroy them after they're confiscated. But this is illegal activity that is chasing people out of the city when at a time we need people to come back to the city and be safe in the city. It's really unacceptable to me. And I think Deputy Commissioner Dales is doing a good job with his detail, but his hands are tied. He needs more funding. We need a 30-day intensive program to really get this under control. And we need the mayor behind this. The mayor should be here tonight. He should be endorsing this because this is quality of life. People are not going to stay in their homes if they don't feel safe. This is the #1 issue. So if I sound upset, I am, because I see it every day and I have people calling me every day, and it's not right. Everyone's entitled to what we call the quiet enjoyment of their space, and they're not getting that right now. And there are people riding on the sidewalks. Wait till somebody gets killed, and then we'll have action. We don't want that to occur.
Exactly.
Anyway, I'm sorry if I sound upset, but I am upset.
Well, I think you're voicing the sentiment of the 1,100 people that are currently joining us now, not to mention the people that are probably watching us on Facebook Live. But you brought up some very important points, and that is hands being tied, which largely comes down to funding. So I want to ask you, Councilman Green, what is the possibility of getting the funding untied so Deputy Commissioner Dales could really put his plan into full force action?
Well, I want to thank you, Eleanor, and everyone here for this conversation. And I'm glad to be joined both with Council Members Domb and Squilla and Deputy Commissioner Dales and others from the city. And as Deputy Commissioner Dales said earlier, this is not just a specific issue for one neighbor in the city. It's a citywide issue. Years ago, when I was president of the Community Association East Mentoring Neighbors for about 15 years, and we had the issue of ATVs in parks that were destroying parks. Now we're seeing that in our center city core. So it's definitely a resource issue. We have less officers than we've had in the past. I think that we need to do more enforcement. I've been, reaching out to other cities to see what they're doing. I have a couple calls coming up in next week because I do serve on the board of the National League of Cities, and I also serve as the president of Pennsylvania Municipal League. And a number of cities are dealing with the same issue. But I think also when you talk about resources, and I've seen a few cities start to do some of the things that Deputy Commissioner Dale said in reference to training police officers to be on motorbikes, because that's part of the challenge in reference to pursuing those who are doing these things illegally. But we just received hundreds of millions of dollars from the American Rescue Plan that I and my colleagues on city council and members of city councils across the country pushed for very hard. We did have a deficit of 450 million, but we're going to have 250 million this year, another 700 million next year. So we should be allocating resources to address this citywide issue. And that's why we had this budget process. Actually, right before I came on, we're having public testimony during the budget process. I know we'll have public testimony again. I believe it's the 3rd week of May. I have to check the date for everyone. But we need to hear from citizens that we should be allocating our dollars, just like all the other issues we're dealing with, but to address these issues in reference to how do we provide the resources to Deputy Commissioner Dale, who I've had several emails and conversations with. I know he's reached out and had conversation with a lot of community groups, but this issue has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. Each day we have a nice day, and it's not going to stop until we have some type of real type of enforcement, and that's all of us. That's us in City Council providing the resources for the police department. It's the police department having those details allocated to make sure they're tracking trends, people coming down Broad Street at a certain time of day, maybe having a detail there in South Street, and some of the other issues that Mr. Montanez and Mr. Carroll talked about in reference to street closures, and the district attorney's office doing enforcement. And we also should probably talk with the First Judicial District when we've had issues of other types of specific challenges and crimes. We've had specialty prosecutions of courts. And I think we need to look at all of these opportunities and perspectives to address this issue. And even considering this is a nationwide issue, a number of cities are having this concern. I talked to the council president from Atlanta on Sunday night. They're having the same issue. Maybe we should do things at a federal level in reference to the manufacturers of these motorbikes and ATVs, because they're supposed to be all-terrain vehicles, but people are using them on streets around the nation. And so we should look at all of these avenues in reference to this issue, because I'm sure if cities around the country are dealing with this issue, there's not just Congressman Brendan Boyle, Congressman Dwight Evans, and Congressman Mary Gay Scanlon, but members of Congress from around the country are having the same issue for the constituents that they represent. So I think we need to look at all of these issues, but immediately we need to put some dollars in the budget to address this going forward and try to provide the resources to Deputy Commissioner Dales, at least having officers trained on the motorbikes. And I saw someone sent me a video in one city in particular that did have a deterrent factor, because now they're seeing they could be pursued by someone on a motorbike. So that's something I think we should immediately address now, as well as some of the issues we've all been talking about this evening. And I think this conversation is a good start. We should continue the conversation so we can not only have these larger conversations, but also as more targeted conversations on these issues going forward.
Councilman Green, thank you so much. You absolutely touched on the point that is so important, and I want to review at the end because I also want to get to some questions and also the DA's office, but and hear from Mr. Carroll. But it is important to realize that this is it's a powder keg of an issue, and it needs to get settled. And by no means my understanding any of you saying that it ends there. We want to look further into a park, into social programs, into looking at entrepreneur possibilities. So this energy and this enthusiasm for these vehicles can be channeled more productively, but it's got to be a multi-tiered process, and the situation has to be managed, put under control in a manageable way first and foremost. And with that, I'm going to go to First Assistant District Attorney, Mr. Listenbee. Can you explain to people, again, we've got about 1,100 people from across the city. How can they better understand when they see, when the perception is that there is no pursuit because there are no charges to be placed, because all of this is very difficult and hands off? Can you explain what how the DA considers and processes these kind of illegal actions?
Certainly. First of all, this is a very, very important issue that is negatively impacting the quality of life across the city of Philadelphia. That's clear from everybody who's commented this evening. It is also a complex issue that requires a comprehensive solution, one that focuses on prevention, deterrence, and of course, upon enforcement. Let me start with our side of the ledger, which is the enforcement side. There are very few arrests. There are very few arrests for a lot of reasons. I think the police department and Deputy Commissioner Dales can explain that a lot better than I. But there's a real risk of concern of injuring other Philadelphians if you have high-speed chase. That's not a decision that the district attorney's office gets involved in. If there are arrests, there are a limited number of charges that I'm aware of and that we've encountered that can actually be charged. Typically, it might be disorderly conduct, or it might be recklessly endangering another person. If there is an accident, particularly if there's someone injured, you can make more serious charges. But that's fairly rare, and we hope it remains rare. But I think what we need is some a further more in-depth study of possible reforms. And I'm not talking about weeks, months, and years in making reforms. I'm talking about, let's take a close look at it very soon and come up with some recommendations about what kinds of reforms will give us more enforcement powers. Even if we arrest folks, if the police department arrests folks and we have the disorderly conduct charges, it's likely they're going to be released. If we have charges that are recklessly endangering another person, which is a misdemeanor 2 charge, again, likely going to be released. We will work diligently with victims of crime to make sure that they are available to testify so that we can prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. But I got to just caution folks, if we get into municipal court, as we will get, where we have these kinds of charges, I mean, we will be working as hard as we can to make sure that the courts understand the serious nature of these charges, but it's still likely that the most severe penalty is probably going to be a probationary period, penalty. That's what we've seen so far. I'm very happy to say that we've met with Deputy Commissioner Dales. We will be meeting with him tomorrow. We're available to meet with everybody on this call to work up some solutions and come to some solutions quickly, not next month, not next year, but sometime soon. So let us do what we can to find solutions quickly, and we in the District Attorney's Office will continue to focus on it. Let me make one other point, and that is this. We have moved as many resources as we possibly can into addressing the issue of gun violence. We've worked closely with the Philadelphia Police Department to place assistant district attorneys in all 6 detective divisions across the city, where we've looked to focus on drivers of crime. The court has opened up a new gun court where we've also staffed, and we have some of our most experienced assistant district attorneys there, and they've been doing a very good job of having cases held for court. We've been working since last September in courts on homicide and non-fatal shooting cases where people are shot but aren't killed. We've had over 300 cases held for court. In addition, our juvenile unit has been open throughout the pandemic. So we've been working as hard as we possibly can, looking at this from a balanced point of view, trying to make sure that we address the issues that are at hand and also look for comprehensive long-term solutions. We stand ready to work with anybody on this call or anybody from the community to help find some real solutions. We don't want to drag it out. Let's see what we can do. When I leave my office here in front of the district attorney's office on several nights, I go to pull out traffic and I get swarmed by a lot of young kids on bikes and these all-terrain vehicles. It is frightening, and I can understand it because you're worried about pulling out in the traffic and running over somebody. We've got to address these problems, but there are some solutions across the nation. Let's find those best solutions, but let's do it in a rapid manner so we can get these kinds of situations under control.
Ms. Ingersoll,
Yes.
can I just ask one question? This is
Yes.
for Deputy Commissioner Dales and Mr. Listenbee. What's the policy in reference to confiscation and destroying the bikes? Because I think that has the greatest deterrent factor if they are immediately confiscated and destroyed.
So I can answer that question. So ATVs and dirt bikes is 2 different dynamics as to what occurs. So since there's a city ordinance in place for the ATVs, once we confiscate an ATV, the owner or the operator, they get a $2,000 ticket. They must pay that before it can even be released. And on top of that, they must go through a hearing through the Office of Administrative Review. If they decide on returning the ATV back to the owner, then they have to pay all the fines that are attached to the violation, and plus that $2,000 ticket. If they cannot come up with that, or if the Office of Administrative Review says, no, we're not going to give it back to you, then we will destroy that ATV. Dirt bikes, on the other hand, is a different story. I don't want to go into details. Again, I don't know who's on this call. I don't want to make it easy for folks to get their dirt bikes back, but it's not it's a lot easier to get them back opposed to the ATVs.
Well, this new legislation, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, matter of fact, Councilman Squilla, I had a conversation with Councilman Domb and Councilman Squilla last year about some of the recommendations as far as adding those illegal dirt bikes to the current city ordinance that pertains to ATVs. That'll make it a lot easier for us to keep those dirt bikes off the street. True story. We confiscated a dirt bike last month. I think it was either this week or last week. We can wind up confiscating that same dirt bike again. So those are some of the challenges we're facing with the dirt bikes. And if you notice, there has been an increase of dirt bikes on the street opposed to ATVs. There's a very small number of ATVs being returned to the owner opposed to the dirt bikes.
And explain why that is.
Because
of the legislation. Eleanor, I think the legislation that we are introducing tomorrow will deal with this. And hopefully, because of the language change that we are introducing, will then enable them to treat the illegal dirt bikes the same as the ATVs. That's the goal of this legislation, and I think that will be the biggest deterrent. And so if we, continue to do that, I think working with the authorities, the DA and the police, we could then, see some more confiscations. But we don't have any time left. We need to do it now, and the enforcement has to start now. I really appreciate Deputy Commissioner Dales. I mean, he knows I call him late at night. When I get calls, he gets calls and emails. And what are we going to do about this? There's a big activity going on here. There's racing up Aramingo Avenue. There's this happening and that happening. And we try to get people out there, but again, like Councilmember Green said, it's also resourced, and it's up to us as council to look at those resources and make sure we fund enough of it so that we could get these enforcement measures done, working with the police department and district attorney's office.
And before we get to the resources, which is kind of the linchpin in all of this, I do want to go back to Mr. Listenbee when you said reforms. Can you explain reforms? Are we talking tightening of the language? Is it coming from City Hall? Is it with you? If you, the reference that the reforms might be able to make enforcement easier and less reliant on a probationary penalty for disorderly conduct. Can you expound upon that so all of the listeners understand?
The charges that are available in the crimes code at the moment are those two: recklessly endangering another person, which is a misdemeanor of the 2nd degree, and disorderly conduct, which is a misdemeanor of the 3rd degree. If there are going to be new charges added based upon new legislation, then we have higher enforcement powers. If they become a felony, we can felonies charged, and we find that the elements have been made out. Then we will prosecute the cases, and felonies are much more serious. People are more likely to avoid getting felonies than they are misdemeanors. I just want to point out that even with the misdemeanor charges, if there are victims where there are cases in the police arrest for recklessly endangering another person, we will prioritize those cases. We will have our victim services unit work closely with the victims, make sure that they are available to testify so that the cases actually lead to convictions. We're willing to do that and work diligently with the police department on that. Even with disorderly conduct, again, we can work diligently to try and address this problem, but we want a comprehensive plan to really try and tackle all these issues of prevention and deterrence and enforcement simultaneously. But we're going to start right now. We're not going to wait for a new plan, but we would love to have a plan that puts some resources here so that we don't have to deal with this issue over and over and over again. Next year, this time, I hope we have a new set of issues and not this particular problem. And we solve this problem. Our young people may become very athletic and do really well in a sport connected with this. I don't know. We used to have skateboarding all over the city, and that changed when we built skateboard parks. Maybe there's some other solution that might work. But in the meantime, we're going to enforce the law, and we're going to do our very best to work closely with victims. And again, a victim, you walk out in the street, get run over by somebody on one of these bikes, let's prosecute it. We will be there to prosecute it. Anyone who has any questions can get in contact with myself or G. Lamar Stewart, who's in charge of our community engagement unit. And we will follow up on these kinds of things with a lot of enthusiasm.
That is very good to hear, because a growing number of the comments we heard from our registrants and elsewhere is the growing harassment, where there might not be anything punishable, but it feels like it's ratcheting up. So it's good to know that people need to understand that there's a process if a line is crossed, and to move forward with prosecution. I now want to ask you, Mr. Carroll, after hearing from the other participants tonight, what funds is the managing director, is the city, is the mayor willing to put behind, as we said, so Deputy Commissioner Dales, the police can enforce what they're there to enforce with these ATVs, of course, in conjunction with the tightening of the laws and reforms that the councilman and Mr. Listenbee referred to?
Well, I just would want to first start off by thanking you for having me here tonight, and with a great panel of speakers who have covered a lot of the important issues that we're talking about. Certainly, we appreciate everyone's frustration with the situation. We do take it seriously, and we are working collectively across departments and with our partners in City Council to try to identify these solutions. and to push forward on a better outcome, because we do understand that this is an important quality of life issue for all of you and for folks across the city. I want to also try and put into context that, what we're seeing here with ATVs being an issue and the way that they're being driven around is part of a larger issue that we've had around traffic safety in the last year during the pandemic. Councilmember Domb, referenced, what will happen when somebody dies. And the fact is, a lot of people have actually died already in the last year due to traffic violence in the city. We've had 158 people die in 2020, and that's almost 100% increase over the amount of folks who were involved in fatalities in 2019. So this is a very serious issue. We're aware of that. I think it's true that there's no magic bullet to fix it, but we are engaged in identifying the best solutions from an enforcement perspective, but also in thinking through as best we can the engineering solutions that are going to help deal with these problems. So certainly my hat's always off to Deputy Commissioner Dales for the work that he's involved in, very challenging work. Also Deputy Commissioner Montanez for being very innovative in terms of thinking about how we can use our streets in ways, design our streets in ways, and implement measures that can start to address these problems. So I'm not prepared to speak about the specifics of what's in the budget, but the budget is in process now. We're involved in presenting our concepts and defending them for the council members who are on this call and the rest of the city council. We're certainly looking forward to working with them as they identify priorities based on their feedback that they're hearing from the community to elevate issues like this, to figure out how we can fund them and resource them. I'm gratified, as Councilmember Green was saying, that we're seeing increased resources from the federal government. That does give us an opportunity to take on these types of issues. That money isn't necessarily all appearing at once. We're going to get a big chunk of it now, and looking for opportunities to improve our approaches, not only to enforcement, but take on infrastructure that also helps address these problems. But I think we do need to be very forward-looking, and we need to look at the long game here. And we're learning a lot in the work we're doing now in terms of what works and doesn't work. Certainly, I'm very gratified to hear Councilmember Squilla say that the proposed legislation is going forward tomorrow. I actually think that's going to make a big difference over time. Deputy Commissioner Dales, references that the folks who are doing this have switched from using ATVs so much to the dirt bikes, and there's a reason for that. The reason for that is because they discovered over time that when they were caught and their ATVs were confiscated, they were not getting them back and they were being destroyed. So at first, in many senses, as Deputy Commissioner Montanez says, it feels like we're pushing the problem around, but we do start to catch up on these things over time. And so I'm hopeful that if we can continue to maintain the focus that we are and to elevate that focus, obtaining more resources, both at the federal level and working with city council, that we can start to turn the corner on this problem over time. And I'll just say one more thing. I think a big part of what's been happening over the last year is just the nature of what's going on in the street has changed so much over the last 12, 15 months. What we've seen is that the streets are empty in ways that they aren't typically. And that's presented people with an opportunity to do things and to behave in ways where they haven't been able to behave or get away with in the past. We need to take that on head on, but I also feel confident when the city starts to come back to life in the way we hope it does at the end of the pandemic, that will reinforce our efforts and we'll be in a better position to more effectively enforce and rely more on the engineering and infrastructure investments we're hopeful to make in order to see that result come quicker rather than later.
I appreciate that all very much, Deputy Commissioner Carroll. Unfortunately, it's a lot of what people have heard, and the action is what we wanted, and was this the sole goal of this community meeting, this town hall. Again, still at 1,000 people participating and watching, and it seems to come down to resources. So unfortunately, you're in the hot spot where the managing director was supposed to be, but people need to know that it is going to be a priority. And the streets, people are coming back out to the streets. And I've got a binder of questions that came through with our registrants. And a lot of it was fear. People are scared. They're getting swarmed. They're going out to eat. They don't feel safe. A woman was surrounded carrying her child home. I mean, the stories are long and they're a little frightening. So yeah, we all want it to get better, but we need some concrete earmarks, promises, if you will, about seeing it through. We're one of the
Well-
biggest cities in the country. I gather that we have woes just like everybody else, but this is an escalating problem that needs immediate attention, and that comes in the form of money.
Yeah, well, Ms. Ingersoll, what I will do for you is I will go back and we'll put together a memo. And in that memo, what we'll do is we'll specify the investments that we're targeting towards traffic safety. Not all of them are gonna read loud and clear, this is about ATVs, just to be clear. But hopefully that will give folks some perspective of the attention the administration is paying to this issue.
Ms. Ingersoll, if I could
I appreciate
jump
it.
in for one moment.
Yes, please.
Because that should not just be from the managing director's office of the streets department, but also from the police department as well. Just so we have an idea of not only from the streets, but also from the enforcement perspective from Deputy Commissioner Dales and his ATV unit. So we have an understanding what was already proposed in the budget, and then also having the information come to us in council as we're deliberating on the budget, what additional money needs to be put into the budget before our budget session ends and the new fiscal year starts July 1.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
Also, Eleanor, I think with the budget, and we're talking about the illegal bikes, but I think the noise is also a major issue of how we're addressing the noise issue. And I know years ago on, at least on South Street, there was a major enforcement push on the loud radios and loud music. And it sort of, after a year or so, it sort of went down because of really strict enforcement on those vehicles, especially on South Street, because you really couldn't move because the cars were bumper to bumper. They couldn't get away. But the noise is something that is something that's really, really bothering the quality of life of folks. And it's not only with these vehicles, whether they're illegal or legal. I mean, we have a lot of the slingshots, they're legal vehicles, a lot of the motorcycles, even these cars, they're legal. But yet the sound that vibrates and that emanates from these vehicles is just really disturbing. And so, you know, do we need additional resources? Do you need sound meters to enforce that? Is there something that we as council could do to make it enforceable? Or is that something that we need the state police or somebody else to do to come in and help us with that?
Oh, you can provide the meters, that'll be great. But I had a conversation with the commanders, the lieutenant of South Street, he's been out IOD for quite a while. He's due to return hopefully next week. And we have had a conversation about increasing our enforcement in reference to the loud noises on South Street. So we are working on enhancing enforcement.
We have,
Eleanor, this is Councilman Domb. I have two ideas I just want to throw out there. They may be a little off the chart, but that's probably what we need today. And I will say, Deputy Commissioner Dales, these ideas are not from me. They came from different people on the ATV detail. And I just want to put them out there because maybe it's something we should do. I think Baltimore, and you can verify this, did they pass legislation not allowing fuel sales for ATVs and dirt bikes in that city?
That was part of the conversation we had with the council member as well. Was it like 2 weeks ago? Councilman Domb talked about that. So yeah, I do know that other cities are doing that, but the problem is they still having the same issues. Baltimore still having issues with ATVs and dirt bikes as well. But I'm like this, let's not make it easy for the riders. If we can definitely enforce that, that'll be great.
I'm just trying to brainstorm some ideas.
That's a great idea. Listen, I would love to do that. I want to do that. We don't want to make it easy for the riders. You want to get gas, you have to travel far to get it. So yeah, I agree.
What about the fact that one of your ATV people told me that a lot of these dirt bikes and ATVs are stored at like U-Haul facilities, and technically you're not supposed to be storing them there because they're a gas tank, and that could be problematic. Is that something we should look at legislatively?
So we are looking at that. We are looking at that. That's one of the reasons why we're having a meeting with the district attorney's office as well as our legal counsel within our department. So we are looking at that. And I don't want to go into details.
Okay, that's fine. I think we need like 10 different things, but I do think we need that intensive the next 30 days citywide, some sort of program to get this under control.
Right.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Eleanor.
And I know one other thing, Eleanor, I'm sorry, I'm jumping real quick because I know we're getting close to the end, but 911 and the calls that go unanswered, I think, is a major, major concern. And I know, Deputy Commissioner, we've talked about that. And that also is probably a budgetary issue. And if we're going to talk about details and things like that, we might have to talk about, we were on a health hearing this afternoon, and the conversation was that the 911 callers are actually taking longer to go through the calls because of the health department criteria. And then as they take longer to go through these calls and decide where to send them, there's more and more people calling in. So we need more intake people. And that's something I think we as council need to look at if you deem that necessary to add to the budget.
Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to, before I wrap it up of everything that we have covered tonight, because I would very much, as many of you have mentioned, circling back around in a month and taking the temperature of this and letting people come back. I did say we had over 244 questions. I'm hoping many of them were answered by this. Kate Allan is monitoring the chats, but I wanted to tell you some other questions that came in, actually specifically to what Councilman Domb just brought up. John from Fishtown wrote, on Day Street in Fishtown, we have a massive garage that is zoned for residential use that's been illegally used by tenants to store, repair, and at its peak house about 40 ATVs, dirt bikes, and dune buggies. The neighbors and I collectively sent hundreds of requests to L&I to call the cop and called the cops many, many times. Finally, they were shut down by L&I 8 months later, which took absolutely forever, to only find out that they are bringing back ATVs illegally again to the garage. It is unfair to us residents that we must live through this illegal act and now have to waste our time policing our own block again. We need the city to take charge of this fast for law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. And that's kind of the sum of how we began tonight's meeting, is that the much onus of many management issues are being put on neighbors, volunteers, their civic organizations. And that is what is getting very taxing. So recognizing, tightening up in laws and language, allocating the necessary funds, and communication. Just as many of you referenced each other tonight, I'm very happy this panel came together because this is the fabric that's going to make the change, from city council and laws to the police and being able to arrest, to prosecution being tight, to streets helping augment, and of course, oTIS and the managing director's office putting towards the funds needed to do all of this. And I wanted to say, Kate, did we miss any important questions that came through in the chat? I know we have over 99 messages, but I wanted to check if there was anything key to bring up.
One thing that I don't think we covered yet was, while we understand the no pursuit policy of the Philadelphia Police Department, if the city implemented camera ticketing technology on various hot intersections or streets, at the very least, could tickets be issued for the numerous violations of ignoring stop signs, traffic lights, speeding, etc.?
So ATVs and illegal dirt bikes, they don't have tags. So we're not gonna be able to track those riders down or the owners. Only that will work for legal vehicles with that are registered.
Are we seeing any other pertinent ones before I sum up? We saw a lot of confiscation questions. We addressed that. And because we want to make sure that if your questions didn't get answered, you can send them to QVNA, and we will make sure they get off to the important departments that they pertain to. I do would love to get confirmation from all of you to circle back around in a month's time, because above all else, residents do want to know what they can do to help make this an easier process. So we talked about what the training of police officers on dirt bikes, tightening up the laws that allow for a better understanding of what is legal and what is not. The pilot for calming, traffic calming on streets. We look forward to seeing what that is. Again, the legislation from the councilman tightening things up. And Councilman Green, thank you for bringing up the third week in May. If there's information that you can circulate about how people can participate in the budget hearings and which ones would pertain to this issue, that would be extremely helpful.
Eleanor,
And-
I can give it to you right now.
Excellent.
It's Wednesday, May 26th from 3 to 5 p.m. That's the public testimony. You can call to register at 686-3407 or send an email to budget.hearings@phila.gov. And I think at the next meeting, we should have Ellen and I here as well.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
So Eleanor, one quick thing. I know what Kate said about that, and it's true what Deputy Commissioner Dale says about the bikes are illegal, they don't have it. Maybe it's something we could work with our state legislators with, and that any vehicle purchased has to be registered and have a plate, and whether it's street worthy or not. And then therefore, we could then maybe have an option to get these ticketed through cameras and things like that. I don't know if that'll work, but if they have to register, whether they're street legal or not, if they're going to be illegal, they probably won't register it anyway. But some people, in order to buy them, may have to put a plate on. They may take them off when they're going to go do things wrong, but it might be just another option, like we're throwing options out there.
Excellent. Well, I do want to thank all of our participants tonight. Deputy Commissioner Joel Dales, Rich Montanez from the Streets Department, Councilman Squilla, Councilman Domb, Councilman Green, First Assistant District Attorney Robert Listenbee, and oh my gosh, yes, Mr. Carroll, thank you so much for stepping in to the hot seat on the hot issue topic. I do look forward to circling back in 30 days. Can I take that as a go from our panelists?
Yes.
You got a thumbs up? I appreciate that. That would be great. Again, if we didn't get to your questions or they weren't covered in tonight's conversation, please do pass them forward to us. And we look forward to notifying you of the next all community town hall. I'm Eleanor Ingersoll. Have a great night.